Welcome to the Digital Analytics Power Hour. Tim, Michael, Mo, and the occasional guest discussing digital analytics issues of the day. Find them on Facebook at facebook.com/Analytics Hour and their website analyticshour.io. And now, the Digital Analytics Power Hour.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Digital Analytics Power Hour. This is episode 146. When in the course of human events it comes time for an analyst to become a manager, or when an analyst has a manager, you have to figure some stuff out to make that relationship work. You know, sometimes it can feel like the manager is a little threatened. It doesn't like the analyst coming up with all these ideas or asking why. Sometimes the manager's great and helps spur the analyst forward in their career. This show was actually based on a suggestion from a listener, Raphael Sahagun. And I am sorry in advance, Raphael. I hope I got your name right. But thank you so much for the suggestion. Okay, Tim, this is the perfect episode for us to finally dive deep into our issues based on the short period of time that I was your manager.
That's perfect. It's the airing of grievances. Can we start now? Can I start now?
Let's get the intro out.
How about now?
And I'm Michael Helbling, sometimes an analyst and sometimes a manager. But we needed a guest, someone who could give us a nice balance of perspective on being both a modern analyst and an excellent manager. Mo Kiss is the marketing analytics lead at Canva. She's also the co-host of the wildly popular Digital Analytics Power Hour podcast. And today she is our co-host and guest, sort of. Welcome.
This is really weird.
I know, isn't it weird? Okay, so not really, but it is sort of like I look at it and be like, yeah, Mo, you're the perfect person to talk to about this topic. So
let's just throw your decades of experience down the toilet and forget about that.
Again, I think we should make the point that, Mo, you are the only current manager of people that is the host of the podcast right now. So
that's terrifying.
Well, I mean, I think it's just the way things work sometimes. So we depend on your wisdom to get us through this show.
It's why we bring you coffee. It's why we defer to you at every turn. I mean,
right. So, Mo, what do you think we should talk about next? No, I'm just kidding. So let's jump into it, because I think one of the things that was brought up was sort of this first kind of negative sounding idea, where it's like, are managers sometimes threatened by the ideas or insights brought forward by the team that they're managing? So maybe we should dig into that just a little bit.
Well, so
I'm just watching this game of chicken happen between Mo and Tim about who's going to talk first. And they're like, no, you.
Whereas normally it's like, no, me.
So what's really great about that I observed there, and I'm sorry that our listeners can't see the video, was the amazing delegation skills that Mo exhibited as a manager.
Because I am about to speak. I mean, I certainly, when I did manage, and I think have covered before, that I explicitly, actively have worked to not be a manager of analysts for a range of reasons. When I have worked for managers, for the most part, I have not, when I was managing, that is such a foreign concept. It seems so destructive, and I don't even know, that's crazy to me. When it comes to the managers that I've had, I haven't run into it. Mo had made a note that she had, which was why I was trying to let her delegate. Everything she points at me sticks back to her.
I guess, the reason that I was happy for you to go first is because I feel like when I say my thing, it's kind of resolute and I'm just shutting the book on that. But basically, if you have a manager that feels threatened by you, you have a really shitty manager. If you have a manager that doesn't want you to be too great because then you're going to outshine them, I would run. That is the worst kind of manager. For me, if my team does an amazing job, that means that I, as a manager, have done a great job. And I would define my own success as a people manager by how amazing my team is doing. So if you have someone that instead sees that as threatening, they suck.
Yeah. Well, and I think sometimes, and whether they're consciously seeing it, I think they're potentially are the cases, there's kind of the inverse of it that I need to, well, it's not the inverse. What doesn't resonate with me is the role of the manager is I am the manager. I am smarter. I'm more experienced. I know more. You are a less expensive version of me who will not do quite as well. Like, I think sometimes to me, you watch people when they move into being like a manager, whereas I've always felt both with the managers I've had, as well as when I've been a manager, that no, there's plenty of stuff that the underling knows better, can do better, has greater strengths, and have always sort of seen it as more of kind of being part of a team. But I can see if there are, I don't know, presumably it's just a show of kind of insecurity and or just kind of a distorted view of what effective management is.
I'm not going to lie, though. I'd love to borrow like a tiny little bit of that confidence, because I definitely don't feel like I think I'm the smartest person. In fact, I would actively go out of my way to hire people that are smarter than me. Like, you're the smartest person in your team, you're doing something wrong.
Yeah.
But having like a bit of confidence, a bit more confidence would be, I guess, a nice thing.
It's true. Okay, so you've resolutely closed the book on it, Mo, but actually I'll give a slight counterpoint. Not that people should be, but I want to share a little experience that I thought was actually instructive and helpful from the other angle, which is when, as an analyst, I was a really inquisitive little shit. And I was always asking why we were doing this and what's the reason for that. And, picking apart everything because I wanted to know. I'm very curious and I wanted to tear it apart. But it also was like slowing some stuff down too. And I actually had a really great manager at that time. And she did a great job of kind of giving me the feedback of like, we don't always have the luxury of being able to get all of the why of everything. And so, I need you to not do that. So like, she was a great manager, but I was sort of like pushing a lot on the boundaries all the time. And it was really good. We were actually able to work out a great solution to that problem. And I learned a ton from that situation. So it can go both ways, but I agree. Like, if you get the sense of like, my manager's trying to shut me down because I'm smarter, because I had a boss one time who was really offended by me and even told my boss's boss that I was a terrible employee.
Wow.
And then they left the organization, and the boss's boss then became my boss and was like, I don't know why they didn't like you.
Well, but it's probably worth separating there is the uncomfortable conversations, even a manager telling somebody to do something like, look, we've got to make a call, or maybe I haven't fully brought you along, but look, in this case, this is how I want to play it, or this is how we're going to proceed. We're not going to discuss it anymore. Hopefully that's rare.
Yeah.
I think that is a different, so that doesn't mean there can't be uncomfortable or unpleasant interactions. I mean, even, providing constructive feedback, that's one of the, that's inherently uncomfortable, separate from the, threatened by. And I'm not even sure, like, sometimes you maybe have to kind of think through, are you telling yourself a story? Well, they keep giving me that feedback because they're threatened by me. There's two sides to every
way to bring up a Brene Brown concept there, Tim. Good job. The story I tell myself.
Oh, I love the story I tell myself. But there is this idea, and I do see it a bit. And to be honest, I have the same thing, which is probably why I recognize it, where I feel like people that are early in their career, like, they just desperately want to progress because progression feels like a sign of like moving forward, and they want to take on more and they want to do more. And like, that's all really good stuff. But there's also like a fine line between your manager, I guess, acknowledging, yep, you're ready for that next step, and being like, hang on a minute, we kind of need to work on these couple of things. And I can see how for some people that might feel like you're being threatened, when actually it's like the manager actually might have really good intent. It's just like the reality of like, they might have more experience and realize like you're kind of not ready for that next step for various reasons. And so, yeah, I think you have to be like a little bit careful to make sure you really understand their intentions. But I think that all comes down to trust. And I fucking hate that. Like, feedback is a gift. It's such a load of shit. Feedback is really useful if you trust the person that's giving you feedback.
That's a great point.
And I had a manager who used to just give me feedback left, right, and center. And I didn't think his intentions were good. So it was like, it was not helpful at all. And so, like, for me, when I've got a new staff member, my first 3 to 6 months, the only thing I give a shit about is building a relationship and forming trust. Like, that to me, because you can't ask them to do a task without context, or you can't like push them into an uncomfortable space unless you build that trust. And so if you're like not sure about the intentions of your manager, I would be trying to work on building that relationship.
You just defined almost, Mo, the first layer of successful teams, which is building psychological safety.
But see, I also hate that term because I'm like, people are like, we have a psychologically safe work. Like, we can say whatever we want. And then it's like, no, actually, just because you said that doesn't mean I can suddenly share my opinion without retribution.
Yeah. So when I was a kid, Karate Kid was a huge movie, and every kid wanted to be a karate person.
The one with Jaden Smith?
No.
Is that right? Did I even get that right?
Yes, you did. Great job.
Okay, that is amazing. Okay, you're talking to Ralph Macchio. Okay,
yeah, sick reference. No, yeah, Ralph Macchio, Karate Kid, and so all the kids would do karate, and there would be kids who run around, but eventually you run into someone who actually knows karate, and the thing of it is the people who know karate don't talk about knowing karate. Same thing with companies and cultures that actually create psychological safety. They don't talk about psychological safety. And so it's like the more people say like, oh, we're an open environment. We're an honest culture. We're this. No, the lady doth protest too much. Like it's basically like the story they tell themselves is that. And in reality, it's probably a facade.
So what sorts of things do you do? I like the building trust, and you, because you, Mo, probably do it much more consciously and deliberately. But what does that actually look like? And I guess there's kind of two ways. There's one, you move into a manager role where you had been working with people. I guess, does that also apply if you've hired somebody new from the outside? Hey, I'm the manager of the team. We've gone through and hired. Is it the same thing? And what does that actually look like?
I don't know, like, because I was in that place when I was at the Iconic where I went to becoming a people manager, and the thing was like I was then managing people that were really, really good friends that I'd worked with for years. I don't know, I feel like people really struggle with that step, and I kind of don't get it because, and this is going to sound like the most corny crap I've ever said, I had a woman in my team who English was a second language, and I'd like worked really closely with her on developing her public speaking skills. And she said to me when I left, she was like, Mo, you were my leader before you were ever my manager, and you'll be my leader long after you're ever my manager. So for me, whether you're my manager or not is kind of irrelevant because you're always like that person that's just like kind of championing me and like helping me with these skills, which I'm not going to lie was like the most beautiful, lovely thing anyone's ever said to me. And it sounds so corny, but I actually had this conversation with a woman in my team yesterday that I'm like dying for her to start coaching staff. And she's kind of like, well, what do I need to do to take the next step? And I'm like, you don't, you're already doing it. Like, you're already coaching junior people in the team. You're already sitting and working on PRs, and like, that change of title shouldn't change anything that you're doing really, other than you're suddenly responsible for like ticking HR forms and like approving leave. But the kind of person you are and the way that you're working with your teammates should kind of be the same.
I mean, I think it is challenging to see some degree of sort of, I mean, there are different styles. There are different management styles. Mm-hmm. I think to your people wanting to progress, I thought you were going to head to the path of, especially kind of younger, newer to the workforce. It's like seen as like, that's the big, that's the step, is when I become a manager, and they have kind of an idea of managing that is, as you were talking, I was thinking, yeah, that's when kind of the holding people back and saying, and I've had I've had worked with or parallel to managers who said, look, we're not promoting you to a management role where that person's reporting to you, but you know what? We have an intern coming on and you can sort of oversee the intern for the summer. Or why don't you take on leading this project? And that whole thing around, yes, you can still have responsibility where you're providing guidance and some degree of oversight, and you're now accountable for work that is not purely produced by you. And I've watched some people who are so chomping at the bit to like, I want to progress. And in their mind, it is like, until I have a direct report, that's not happening. We had years ago at an agency where agencies are, they're right up there with banks with title inflation. So what's the most junior level person is a manager. Like that's your manager. And this person literally, she got hired. She came in and like a week in was like, I don't understand. Like, I'm a manager. Who's working for me? It's like, how did you get through all of the interviewing process? You're 23 years old, but I don't know. So that goes back to the individual figuring out what and there are people who do want to lead people and really, really get jazzed by that. But it's like the jump to manager and checking off the boxes of like you said, the HR forms. And that is kind of that's the administrative grind part of it. The effective managers is much more about being able to read people, figure out their strengths, shift things around, build the trust, allow for personal growth and professional growth. And I think that's just kind of what is a manager is something people struggle with.
Yeah.
I do think that's why so many companies now are coming up. And to be honest, even in analytics at the moment, I'm kind of working on how I can build out like 4 different tracks for progression. So like lots of companies now are starting to work down the like team lead manager track and then the individual contributor. So yep. I actually love how Atlassian do it, where they have like a principal data scientist for this product. And that basically means you're in the meetings, you're helping make the decisions, but you don't necessarily manage people. And I love that concept because I do think it's really important to have progression that is not just becoming a people manager, because it kind of poisons the well a bit when you have people that don't really want to manage people, but they want progression. It always ends in disaster.
Yeah. And that's the problem with so many corporate environments. The easiest mindset that I have, or the most basic way that I think about sort of manager versus individual contributor, is it's a shift in thinking about where success gets generated. So if I'm an individual contributor, then I create success based on my efforts. If I'm a manager, that success happens through other people. And so it means giving up getting direct credit for the successes of what's going to happen. Now, a good corporate environment will understand that those successes are happening because of a great leader. But this is probably where people run into problems, is when they still think like an individual contributor as like the success has to be mine. So it has to be my idea. It has to be my thing. I've got to be up in front presenting. I've got to be the one showing everybody how smart I am. And not understanding that actually your success is much more dictated by how you make everybody on your team shine from here. Like, how do I make them as awesome and as enabled as they can be? And then I think another thing where I want to take this conversation is a direction I want to take this conversation is the actual role of the analyst itself. I actually think it's really special in a corporate environment. There's not a lot of people who function as analysts. And so like, I'd like us to maybe talk about that just a little bit too, because in a certain sense, I think managing an analyst represents a somewhat unique challenge versus a lot of other roles.
Well, I feel like analysts are often seen as like, especially at Canva with my team, we're often seen as like the neutral voice of reason, where we're like not invested. So like, let's say finance and the marketing team are discussing things to do with budget and ROI and LTV and all of this stuff. The analyst is the neutral party that kind of doesn't have a stake in the game. They're often looked to as like, hey, what's your advice? Because I know you don't care if we increase their budget or if we change their ROI KPIs. It's like, what's just the best decision based on the data you've got. And I'm not saying that analysts are without bias and yada, 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 but I do think they can be that kind of like neutral voice of reason. And that often means they're involved in conversations that they probably wouldn't be if they were in any other role in the company. So you might be sitting in meetings with executives and like you're exposed to more of the company, I sometimes feel, than other people at the same level in different roles.
I had a manager, I've talked about her on the podcast before, she was running our BI department, which was different from what I think BI should be. This was 20 years ago. And she said, we actually in many ways know the business better than the people we're supporting, because we're inherently working kind of across data sets and across groups. And that was one of the reasons that we would recruit people from in the organization who had subject matter expertise around an area or a process and then would come in. But it sounded like, on the one hand, it sounds like a lot of hubris, but on the other hand, it's kind of the reality, because in order to pull and interpret the data, you have to understand where it's coming from, right, and get a little more down in the weeds. And then often we're trying to look at, something happening at point X. What is the impact at point Z? So it starts to kind of bridge across different areas. So that stuck with me, because when I took over managing that group from her, that totally stuck with me, where I realized we would be in conversations. But that also goes to, it can be scary. Like as a manager prepping someone to say, hey, you're an analyst on my team. Yeah, you're going to be 3 levels down from anybody else in that room. Yep. And you need to not be afraid to ask a question, but you also need to not, shit the bed with, you also need to triple check your data, all those other. Mm-hmm. So I think that aspect of back to kind of the manager analyst relationship of how do you support them going in? Because you can have the manager that says, ooh, that's going to be too scary for you, or I don't know, I don't want you to embarrass the department, not necessarily thinking about themselves. So they will go in, but there's this art to saying
that's a sign of a crap manager. Like a good manager is someone that pushes you that little bit. Like basically, if your manager is always in those meetings, if your manager is always the one presenting at like show and tells or stand-ups and things like that, to me, that's a problem. Like you should be involving your team in that stuff. And that means little step by step.
You went full throttle from, I think there is if you get somebody new, there is kind of a degree of easing them in, and there is kind of a case, right? So,
for sure. But you would support them and be like, so for example, there's a girl on my team who's never presented at our like group show and tell, which is like 200 people.
I'm not even talking about presenting. So that was not remotely the point I was trying to make.
I'm not saying it's the point you were trying to make.
Well, but you're like, that's a shit manager. Okay.
No, a shit manager is someone who makes a decision that you're not ready to be in that room without having a conversation. So the way that I would handle that is have the conversation with the person. I want you to be in that room. What can we do together to get you ready for that? If you have if you make a decision that person is not ready to be in that room and you never have the conversation with them, I think that's a problem. Like you should be prepping that person and helping support them. And like, what are the little things we can do? Like, can we get you to present at like a weekly leads meeting first? So you have some practice before you go into a room that's got a bunch of executives. But if you're as a manager making that decision without ever talking to the staff member, you're not giving them the chance to step up.
I agree with the first part. I just want to be clear that I was more talking about when you need to be in a discussion where questions are being asked, where ultimately it is more requirements guide. I wasn't in any way thinking about who's presenting in that room. I was specifically in my mind thinking, we're talking about the product strategy or the marketing strategy, and we need to have someone who can listen and has enough experience. And sometimes what's weird is it's like, well, we should go ideally, and I run into this now. I mean, I'm not managing anybody saying, well, no, I can't drop that person in and actively engage and come out of that and help participate in the discussion, help guide the discussion, come out knowing and be able to put together a plan for what we're going to do. I can't just drop them in on their own. It's tough sometimes to say we should go in together so you can sort of observe and see and hear. And I think that advocating for it and saying, yeah, I'm bringing that person along. Are they going to sit quietly for 4 of these meetings and probably not say anything? Yeah. And you know what? That's okay. They're welcome to speak, but they need to hear the discussion. They need to hear the interaction. They need to hear how, we operate. And that can be sometimes kind of a challenge, because like, why are they coming? They're not contributing anything. It's like, well, because I would like them to contribute at some point, and they're not going to do it if I just come back and, describe what happened in the meeting.
But would you have stakeholders? Like, I think shadowing is a great recommendation, and it's a really good way to prep people for those meetings. But I would never have other people in the meeting who'd be like, why is that person here? I'd be like, hey, they're shadowing. I want to grow their responsibility in their profile. This is an opportunity for them to start to understand what happens in these meetings so that eventually they can go in my place. I feel like other people would support that.
So, well definitely on the agency side, you have to be very careful with how it's communicated, whether or not they're being charged for that person sitting there. So, which can totally be finessed, right? And then even that but I think even that again gets back to if it is a small group of people who've worked together and they're very senior and they know each other, and you're bringing in somebody who these people don't know, it is going to change the dynamic even with just being in the room. So again, I don't think it's like a black and white, like, what the hell are they doing here? Ideally, that's an opportunity for the manager to say, hey, this person has a lot of potential, but has not actually observed these. Just so you know, I'm going to bring her along, and I'm not telling her not to speak. I mean, probably there's still a degree of, prepping, but it's like, no, it's not sit over in the corner and just watch, but it's also like, look, don't feel like you have to chime in. We've all worked with those people who've been told, right, that like, if you should never go for more than, like, if you're in a meeting and you don't speak, like, when that just annoys the shit out of me when they're like, I'm going to talk now because I haven't spoken. So therefore I'm going to open my mouth and interrupt the flow of the conversation.
I got asked that in an interview once. I had to do a group interview when I was the only woman. I was in an interview with 11 white dudes, and there was like 4 different exercises we had to do. And in one of them, I didn't contribute a whole lot. And they asked me, they're like, why didn't you say anything during that session? And I'm like, well, I didn't know very much about the topic that we were talking about, so that was a good chance for me to listen. I contributed lots in the other 3 sessions because it was somewhere I could add a lot of value. And the fact that they noticed, I thought was kind of weird. I didn't take the job, by the way.
12-person group interviews.
But yeah, it's funny actually, just looping back on that point about bringing someone along. We've had some agencies pitching at Canva, and there was one agency that had brought someone quite junior along. They were a grad. They were in like their first year in the job. And someone actually said like, oh, that's so weird. Like they would have a grad on our account. The president of the company was there and all these like big faluting people. And someone actually pointed it out as like, oh, well, we don't really want a grad on our account. And I actually was like, I think it's fantastic that they've got a grad pitching a huge client, like a big meeting, and they're making space for people like that in the meeting. I think that's really cool. So you're right. I can see how from an agency perspective, that dynamic would be quite different.
Yeah. Well, so I think there's a rule of thumb or a thing to look for both as an analyst and a manager. So as an analyst, if there is this pattern where you're not getting looped into some of these things, that's what you should be looking for. Like there could be reasons why, like, this is not the right time or this is the right meeting. And I agree with you, Mo. Communication is the best way. Just have that conversation. I also think there's something for managers here, which is if you feel uncomfortable asking your analyst into this meeting, or you feel like they're not ready, and you should look into why that is. Right. Why do I feel that way? What are they not ready for? What are their gaps? Where do I need to make sure I'm providing growth opportunities so that they can do that? And maybe that's just not who they're going to be, but then how do I make sure that I'm giving them a full experience or giving them opportunities where they want them to grow? So I think both sides should look. It's a great way, because I think when we encourage participation specifically, it's a great way to kind of give ourselves a little gut check. Am I being too controlling? Am I nervous? Do I feel like my analyst isn't the right quality? Like there's all kinds of things that might be going on in that conversation. And if I don't have the trust as a manager, that's another thing to look at. Maybe I've got the wrong analyst. And as an analyst, if I'm never getting those chances, well, maybe I've got the wrong manager. So
Totally agree.
Both sides of that, really good to explore.
How do you deal? I mean, one of those being like, well, this is a person who has got in their mind that they really want to do X. They're super talented at Y. X, they just aren't really clicking. If I could change what their interest is, like there's sort of two sides. There's the person who says, I want to grow that way. And you're like, man, it just seems like you're so much better at this other thing. The other is, I would say worse, is when they're like, tell me what I need to do to advance. And I'm like, I don't know. What do you care about? But
that's the stupidest question.
No, I've got 4 stories on that one. But have you run into that though, where you've got somebody who is, super great communicator? That's a bad example.
I think the thing, and I was chatting about this with a friend the other day who I actually used to manage, and I do this to myself a lot, where I set my personal goals and I try and set goals that are around people management. And then I also try and set really technical goals, and I fail every single time. I think you can focus on really technical things, and I think you can focus on people management stuff, or like what I mean is 2 very diverse topics. I think it's stupid to try and do them at the same time. I think it would be a much stronger strategy to be like, I'm going to spend the next 3 to 6, 9, 12, whatever your time period is, it doesn't matter, focused on this thing. And I'm going to put 100% of my energy towards, I don't know, developing my EI or doing professional coaching training. And then I'm going to spend the next 6 to 12 months focusing on, say, my analytics engineering skills. And you don't necessarily have to be really good at it to focus your attention on it. It's just about like picking the thing at that point in time that you want to focus on and putting your energy towards that, rather than, because I always do this where I'm like, you need to be more technical, but like you're really good at communication stuff. So I like trick myself into thinking I need to do both at the same time, and it just doesn't work.
The beauty of OKRs. We're back to where before we started recording.
Yeah. Well, and I think I can just use myself as an example for this, Tim. Like I felt for a long time, I should be like this, or I feel pressure to be like this, when in reality, maybe I wasn't ready, or it wasn't even the right set of skills for me to really push into. And it took a long time to sort of merge myself with my job role in a way that made me feel like I was doing the maximum I could do, like making the best contribution. So from a management perspective, I'm pretty open. People say like, this is what I want to do. I want to be a data scientist. It's like, okay, but I know you're not. That shouldn't be.
You kind of suck at that. I still let them do it.
Yes, exactly. And I still support them, because what I want to do is say, I'm going to support what you want to do. I'm also going to ask you to do the things they know you need to do. But I feel like it's a 2-way street. And if they're going to provide the effort and the push and the interest, then I don't ever want to squash that, because part of being a great analyst is having that mentality. And so as a manager, I sort of feel like, or as a leader, I feel like I want that to always be going. Like, because maybe this is not going to where it's going to come out in the best way, but it's going to come out somewhere awesome somewhere else. And it may take time, but that's sort of what I look at when I think of like, that's the beauty of an analyst, is they're very special. Like I have a really high opinion of what an analyst is. And it's really cool when you see a great analyst like do their thing. Like Tim Wilson, for instance, the quintessential analyst. Booyah!
Really?
But I had that data science example come up, and like, to be honest, like this person's never going to be the greatest data scientist ever. But I also don't think your job as a manager is to be like, well, you suck at that thing, you shouldn't do it. I'm like, go spend 6, 9, 12 months, explore that, throw your energy at it. And like, you got to learn this stuff for yourself. They've got to figure out what they're good at as well. And it's kind of not like, I don't think it's a waste of time. They're going to learn a bunch of stuff, but they're also probably going to be able to self-identify what their strengths are a little bit better after that experience. And the best career advice I ever got was from Gillian Triggs, who used to be the president of the Human Rights Commission in Australia. And I spoke to her in Canberra after she'd presented at something. And I said to her, I was like, if you could go back in time and be 25 again, like what advice would you give yourself? And she's like, I was just so obsessed with climbing the ladder. And she's like, I would spend more time in the weeds. Like, go spend a year focusing on data science. Go spend a year focused on analytics engineering. Like, I think we all have this thing where we want to progress so quickly. But she's like, the best managers are the ones that spend a bit of time in all the different pockets. And you don't just become like T-shaped. You become like, I'm trying to do an E, which no one else can see, but like you have all this different broad experience, which will ultimately make you a better manager. So if someone wants to spend 12 months because they think they want to be a data scientist, I'm like, cool, you're going to learn a bunch of stuff. And that's okay.
So a clarification and a question. So if anybody's trying to get an E and try to figure out what the hell Mo was doing, it was an E rotated 90 degrees so that the tines were pointing down. If somebody does say, if they say, I think the data scientist is a great example. If they say, I want to be a data scientist, how much do you take it on yourself to say, okay, then let's focus on that. I want to help you. Let's talk about what are you planning to do for the next 3, 6, like what does that mean? Like, does that mean you're going to spend, and hey, we can adjust every 3 months. Cause I think that's the other, I want to be a data scientist. I haven't even really defined what that is. I just know it's sexy and that's what these other cool people do. And sometimes is that a fair role of the manager to say, great, I want to support you. And I also want to get value out of you while you're doing that. So we want to be clear on what it is that you're focusing on so that if there are projects where we can actually give you meaningful work to do as you're exploring that. But let's actually say, if you're going to focus on that, I, as a manager, am going to hold you somewhat accountable to that in the near term to say, what is it you're doing? And you know what? 3 months from now, and along the way as well, but 3 months from now, we'll talk about, okay, how's that pursuit of data science?
Yeah.
So I guess, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think a lot of times you have to kind of adjust your leadership style to the person. So adaptation. So I feel like there's different personalities that you'll come into contact with that need different things from you. Some people need you to be much more direct, and some people need you to be like laid back and be encouraging and supportive. And so you have to kind of adjust so if they said like, that's what I want to do data science, be like, okay, sure. Here's a budget, go sign up and take a course, come back and report. And then if they don't do it and be like, well, I guess you didn't want to do data science, did you? And maybe that's like the kick in the pants they need that's going to motivate them or do what but if it's somebody who's like more of like questioning themselves, like maybe I want to do data science, I'm not sure. Then you say, well, let's tease that out a little bit. Like what makes you happy? What gives you joy? So like you adjust your style based on what that person needs in terms of support. Cause sometimes it's the best thing that you can do for somebody is be like, give them a ton of rope and watch them really fuck it up. And then come back and be like, all right, so that fucked, right? All right, let's get back on the horse tomorrow. Let's get back at it. And they're better off. Whereas someone that would crush them. Like that would be like the worst thing. I could never show my face in the office again, right? So how I operate, obviously, I'm not that confident about those things. So I need somebody who will kind of encourage me and be like, you can do it, Michael, keep in there and that kind of stuff. But other people might need somebody to just say, hey, get out there and go get him, Tiger. And the problem comes when you get a manager with one style and a person needs another style. And they're like, why isn't Michael responding to my go get him hard charging management style? Like, obviously he's not a team player. Right. And the rest is history.
I try, especially with the data science one, because I've had quite a few staff that want to go down that path. I try and balance it a little bit by setting some goals that are within the workplace, but also getting them to focus on some personal goals. So like the personal goals might be related to like courses that they want to do in their own time or learnings that they want to do, but then try and pick. So one of the girls at the moment is doing a really amazing project, and we've buddied her up with one of the data scientists at the company. And basically it's like productionizing a model that she's built into our data pipeline using the data science infrastructure that they use. And it's still something that's like very relevant for her role as an analyst, but the productionizing it in the pipeline bit is very data science heavy. So she's still like adding value to the business from her like analytics hat, but then she's getting to stretch herself that bit by having a data science buddy. So like I just try and balance it. And if they don't want to do any personal goals around it, then I also just don't think they really want to do it that much.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like,
and we can agree if somebody says they really want to become a data translator, then that you just put them on a performance management plan and kind of get them out of the company. Is that, yeah.
The one I really struggle with is lots of people that they tell me they want to, it's not called a data strategist, but like they want to work on strategy. And I had one guy who was like,
but they don't want to really do oh yeah.
He was like, I was like, cool. So do you want to learn SQL? He's like, no, I don't want to learn SQL. And I'm like, cool. So how are you going to get the data to write your strategy stuff?
No, I really, really like the data. I really like analytics, but it's more just kind of like that's where I had a lady, she was changing. I'd worked with her, never managed her. And then she came and told me that she was like, whoever is Gartner or Force, whoever came up with the fucking data translator thing. She's like, I found this thing. Cause I'm like,
McKinsey.
You're telling was it McKinsey?
Yeah.
Probably was McKinsey. Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah. We all need to be data translators. And I'm like, no, like that is somebody who actually doesn't really have the fire in their belly for one thing, but they really like the idea that I want to be in the sexiest job of the 20th century or 21st century or whatever it is.
Those people just need a kick in the pants sometimes. So you're like, I want to be a strategist. Oh, describe the difference between tactics and strategy, please. And then they're just going to be like, bleh, and they're going to fail that. And then you'd be like, all right, go back to work. And it depends on the person, obviously. So, and I think all of us are tempted by that. So I don't think any of us can sort of be like, oh, I've never had that thought. Or at least Tim probably never had that thought. He works really hard. So I don't like to work that hard. So I think about that all the time.
I also had a data scientist who was like, I just want to do the sexy stuff. And I was like, that's not the fucking job.
Yeah.
I want somebody else to pull and do all the cleansing. I just want to run the model. Yeah.
Yeah. And I actually got really like, I really had to like challenge myself to like not have this visceral reaction to it, because it doesn't matter what your job is. It doesn't matter. There are bits of your job that suck and there are bits of your job that are really great. And that includes a data scientist. You're going to have to pull data. You're going to have to clean data. You're going to have to prep data. You're going to have to test it. Like, you're going to have to build a dashboard. You're going to have to answer some stupid ad hoc question that you don't really think is worth your time. Like, that shit happens in every job. And just because you have a sexy title like a data scientist doesn't mean you're immune from that.
Well, that is the challenge to the analyst who says, I just don't want to do this grunny, shitty work. If that's how they're treating it, and they're like, well, what do you want me to do as a manager? You want me to just shit on somebody else and have them do it for you? Or it's like, or is it you really now as an analyst need to own, how can I make that less shitty? I mean, it might be number one on my list when somebody's like, every week I have to pull this and put it here and it really kind of sucks. I'm like, well, then
automate
it.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
I mean, I'm 100% on board. Like, no, there's nobody working in a job where they're like, every single thing is kind of what they love. I do think there's the challenge to say, well, if 70% sucks and I can't change it, and it looks like there are people who do kind of like this sort of thing, then maybe I need to start figuring out that 30% and how to shift my role or find the job where that kind of expands.
Yeah.
You're never going to get it to zero, though.
The key there is, are they even approaching that concept in any kind of systematic way? Because that just reveals, again, like, well, how good of an analyst are you? You haven't even thought through the problem. Like, who's going to do the shitty work? Oh, well, I've got a plan. I'm going to make so-and-so do it. Oh, why is that? What about their job satisfaction? Do you think that's the job they want to do? We just got to split it up and do the things that we got to do. Okay.
The funniest thing is, I have found.
So, how the guest always has one more thing to say when you're trying to move to wrap.
There is a couple people I found that do love that shit. Like, they are this weird anomaly. Like, for example, I hate building dashboards. I really don't find it fun. I like doing the wireframes. I like thinking about what's going to be on there. But the actual, like, building can be kind of mundane. I used to have a girl on my team that loved it. Like, loved it. That was her thing. She was happy to do the same thing day after day, different dashboard. And I also think that's part of, like, that building the trust and that relationship with your team is, like, figuring out what are the things that people in your team really like and what are the things they don't like, so you can try and balance that workload a little bit better so people are doing the things that they're interested in. That
you just summarized First Break All the Rules, the entire book. Well, it has the separate part of figuring out First Break All the. So Strengths Finder, right? The Now Discover Your Strengths Finder. Well, First Break All the Rules was the first book. The Strengths Finder is Now Discover Your Strengths. I hate Strengths Finder, but First Break All the Rules. The fundamental premise is that people have talents and they have skills. Talents cannot really be. You can get somebody to a marginal level of capability, but talents are kind of innate. And so the trick with a team is to figure different people have different talents they're going to be more interested in. They're going to be natural at it. And you should spend your time helping them foster and grow and strengthen their talents. Whereas the corporate world drives you towards focusing on the weaknesses and spending all of your time. And so there's lots in the book about how managers will spend the most time with their worst employees, which is wrong. You should spend the most time with your best employees, but that exact bit of kind of rejiggering the team and again, there's going to be stuff nobody really wants to do, figure out a fair and equitable way to shuffle that around and build the trust and make sure everybody knows, hey, nobody wants to do it. Anybody has an idea how to make less of it happen, let's do it. But play to people's strengths basically is.
And this is why I should read less. Because every time I read more stuff, I work out thousands of people have already thought the same thing as me before, and now I just need to give them credit for their ideas.
Yeah, I mean, it's what we do, synthesize things. And now what we do is we start to wrap up the show. We do have to do that. Anyways, Mo, thank you so much for being our guest. This has been an awesome conversation. Anyways, one thing we do, as you both know, is do a last call. So let's go around the horn, maybe share something we found recently that we thought might be of interest. Mo, do you want to go first?
So this is an oldie but a goodie, but I've been back in the data viz space, and I just got myself a hot little copy of Stephen Pugh's Information Dashboard Design. And I think the thing, because I do have quite a few data viz resources that I really love and depend on, I think the thing that I'm probably getting out of this book that I haven't gotten out of any of the other ones that I've got is you do often need to create a dashboard that has a lot of crap on it. And I think this really talks through how to manage that kind of busier dashboard. I think it's lovely to envision a world where you have 6 KPIs on a dashboard, but the truth is lots of time people do want 20. So how do you put that together in a way that's not completely offensive to people's eyes? So I'm enjoying that one. What about you, Helbs? Shake up the order a little today.
Well,
look at this. The guest who just comes in and just decides that she's going to run the show.
Now that's a good manager. That's right. I'm just saying. So I want to share something I ran across on the Measure Slack, and I just thought it was pretty interesting. So I think it was shared as part of Measure Camp Cincinnati, which happened back in June. But Albin Jerome presented something where he compared some job market for analytics in the US versus the UK. And I think his broader point was in the UK, there are folks who have pretty deep experience that actually would be way less expensive to hire than the US. And so why not have US companies, since everybody's remote, leverage talent in the UK too? And I was like, that's pretty neat. So worth taking a look at the slides that he put together and kind of thinking about that concept a little bit. But I thought it was a pretty cool little thing, sort of neat. And, as someone who managed some folks in the EU as part of my broader team a while back, I got to say, they were pretty top notch. So there's some pretty high level talent over in the in the UK and in the EU. So
shout out to Cincinnati for doing the first virtual manager camp. And it was, I did not go to that session. I attended the whole day, and I thought this is going to be, it was 5 hours, and it flew by, and was, shout out to Gotham and the gang for doing that. That was pretty cool.
That's awesome. All right, Tim, what about you? What's your last call?
Oh, it's delightful that you think it's going to be a singular.
Well, I could try.
I'll hit some quick ones.
Okay.
So in the vein of conferences and education, I realized that, Adam Greco, Search Discovery, which yes, is where I work, but he started up the Search Discovery education community, which is basically free webinars. I think the idea and structure morphed a little along the way, but like Simo did one, Jim Gordon did one, I did one, Chris Sidon's, I think, still in the future based on when this comes out. But if you just search for Search Discovery education community, well, one, it's hilarious because while you find the right links, there is a company called Discovery Education, and their search results page is search. The title tag is search - Discovery Education Community. So might have a little bit of an SEO issue there, but there's that. We do a terrible job of talking about when we are going to be appearing in places. So to make up for that, I will be at the 2020 Nashville Analytics Summit on September 21st and 22nd, which may be virtual, maybe in person.
I was going to say, it's scary to consider that not being virtual at this point.
It's like, I think it is going to be, and it's like $500 for a day long, 2-day conference, and 10% discount with VIP speaker, all caps is the code. So, I'll be at that. And then really kind of the thing I've just been randomly tinkering with is an R package called Sketcher, which basically is just like in like Photoshop, you can take and apply the filter and make it like look like a pencil sketch. It's just an R package that does that. It's just a couple of functions, and you can tune all the different. The thing when I used to do that in Photoshop was you had to sit there and try one thing, change the setting. So of course I took a script and took some like bird pictures and have it run through like 84 different permutations. Then I can look at them and say which sketch looks the best. But the Sketcher R package is just kind of fun and silly, and I'll stop there.
Nice.
So it was plural, but they were short.
Yes. Last calls. Okay, you've probably been listening, and you've probably been thinking to yourself, as a manager, I disagree, or I agree. Or as an analyst, my manager exhibits some of these things. We would love to hear from you. But not you, Raphael, because you already talked to us. No, I'm just kidding. Of course, we want to hear from you too. And the best way to do that is on the Measure Slack, which we are part of and like to contribute and be in that community. It's a great place. Also on our Twitter page and on our LinkedIn community. So feel free to reach out to us by any of those means. We'd love to hear from you. Also, if you got a mind to, head on over to whatever page it is where you listen to this podcast, the iTunes, Spotify, or Android or whatever, and give us a review or a rating. And we wouldn't mind it one bit. In fact, we'd probably even appreciate it. And no show is complete without extolling the virtues of our illustrious producer, Josh Crowhurst, who he added a little note to the show prep. He's like, he wanted to hear your thoughts about the transition from analyst to manager. So, Josh, I hope we did you proud.
I don't think we've covered that at all.
You did.
Well, maybe we had the tiniest touch on it.
At least Josh knows where to talk to us one-on-one about that if he needs more.
Revenge in the outtakes, I think, is what's going to happen.
No shortage of material. Okay. Thank you so much, Mo, for being our sort of guest.
Still weird.
But actually appropriate. I just, I want to just recognize what you bring to the table of this episode is really good. And of course, for Tim, my co-host, and Mo, I know I say, whether you're a manager or an analyst, one thing is certain: keep analyzing.
Thanks for listening, and don't forget to join the conversation on Facebook, Twitter, or Measure Slack group. We welcome your comments and questions. Visit us on the web at analyticshour.io, facebook.com/analyticshour, or at analyticshour on Twitter.
So smart guys wanted to fit in. So they made up a term called analytics. Analytics don't work.
Analytics. Oh my God. What the fuck does that even mean?
Well, actually, Tim, I would challenge your growth mindset in some areas.
I'm sure you would.
Yeah.
And I would say, you're not my fucking boss.
So, like, you don't have a growth mindset as it pertains to, like, emotional intelligence and empathy and those kinds of things. You think of yourself as static. And I think if you let your heart open up to the love inside you. Are we recording?
Yes, we are.
Oh, good. OKRs are all about how you use them, right? So they can be great, but they can also be a tool for evil. And so that's the problem. Here we go.
I still wish she had muted. Reading lips, that's some profanity being leveled at Maria. That's some, oh wow. Settle down. It's just a podcast.
I feel like we need elevator music. Oh no, that's carnival music.
Rock flag and just do your fucking job.